And welcome to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World, as we're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. And I'll give you all the particulars a little bit later on as we continue here on the program of giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. Looking for those new ways of living. And sometimes those new ways of living might actually encompass some new ways of looking at life, looking at death, looking at whatever we are referring to as the hereafter may entail, and what we can learn from it, her, him, them, whatever the case may be, with our returning guest. It's so great to have her back. After quite a whirlwind trip that she took from New York to California and back again. She's back with us, Patricia Keresey. It is great to have you back on the program. Obviously, you're pretty happy to be back home again. How are you doing?
But I truly enjoyed my time in Santa Barbara. Whirlwind though it was, I really enjoyed it. I had never been there before, so it was really great.
Well, I have to say that though I have been through sort of kind of similar kinds of events, such as what you held here in Santa Barbara on August 18th at the Unity Church here in Santa Barbara Unity Church, or I guess it's Unity Church of Santa Barbara, where you had a gathering of a few people, and it was actually kind of what we might consider more of an intimate kind of thing. It wasn't like you were trying to fill a 60,000 seat auditorium or anything, but you had a few people there, and my observation was that it was kind of like throwing out a bunch of puzzle pieces and then trying to figure out how they fit and where they fit and who they fit to. And I thought that was a rather interesting, I don't want to say it's an interesting observation on my part. I just thought it was rather interesting because that's just the way it came across to me. Have you ever looked at it in that sense that, yeah, oh, I've got this one and I've got the, oh, you're not, nobody connects. Okay, well, we'll put that over here and we'll hang on until, or even sliding tiles. There's another game, sliding tiles, where you're just moving stuff around until it fits or until it matches or until the picture starts to take shape.
Yes, it's very much like that because I am aware from the spirit people what they're showing me, and I'm going to say it, even if it doesn't make any rational sense or I have no context for it, because there have been times in the past where I thought, that doesn't fit, so I'm not going to say anything. And then afterwards, my sitter says to me, or my client says to me, oh, if you'd only said that. And I'm like, darn it, I saw it, I couldn't make sense of it. So it is in my translation of the symbols the spirit people are showing me, like trying to play charades with them. They're playing charades with me and trying to build a picture or build a story from a bunch of those sliding tiles.
Yeah, it's really very interesting process to watch. And I there was a part of me that I had to. At first, I said, I'm just going to take it with a grain of salt, whatever she says, because she already knows a lot about me because of the last interview that we just did. I shared a lot about my life and this and that and the other thing. But then when you started talking with other people and connecting with them, and does anybody recognize this, that, or the other thing? You would put out some information. I'm trying to remember I'm trying to remember exactly what it was that you said in regards to what I connected with. And at first, I'm thinking, well, that sounds rather interesting. It's kind of benign, kind of a calm, peaceful life that these people that she's referring to are living. And you kept going on and on and on. And I'm going, it kind of sounds like my mother's parents. My grandparents that I grew up with when I was a kid. We get shipped off every summer for 2 weeks to spend time there. That way my parents only had to deal with 4 of us instead of all 6. And then all of a sudden I'm Pete. And anybody, Peter or Pete, well, I got an uncle and my grandfather is named, he went by Pete, and so on and so forth. And I think that the thing that was real interesting for me was I hadn't thought about them in a long, long time. I was thinking about a bunch of other people that we may have talked about in our last interview that I thought, I hope this person comes. I wish this person would come through because I really would like to talk to my friend Ramona. I'd like to talk to this person. I'd like to hear from them and hear what they're saying and doing and their insights and so forth. And none of them came through. Because that's not how it works, is it?
Right. No, I have no control over who comes through.
Yeah.
And so when my clients come, I ask them, and I think I said this at the beginning of our group, the spirits are going to connect with me in the order in which they can connect with me. So I don't know who's important to those people out in the audience. And so I'm just going to present everybody who comes forward in the order in which they come forward. And I like that the spirit people know not to bring through some of the people that you might have told me about in our last interview, because the
Yeah.
spirit people want to make sure that those of us in the living world are as convinced. I'm one of the biggest skeptics out there. So I set a high standard for myself and for the spirit people. Like, you got to show me something that is really going to click and blow this person away. So,
Yeah.
I know what's going to come out of my mouth in these wonderful
But
connections.
yeah, but you have regular clients, if I'm not mistaken,
Yes.
and they will come to you, I don't know, once a week, once a month, every 6 months, whatever the frequency is. And again, it'll be the same thing where, yeah, I'd like to hear from. No, that's not how. No, you can call whoever you want on your phone, but you can't just call the spirit in to talk to them or have them impart information. Those who are ready to come in and impart information to you, they are the ones that will come through. And is it like you need to, as the receiver of this information, not you specifically, but you're more of the conduit. I'm the receiver of the information. I need to take the perspective that whatever comes through, from whomever it comes through, I need to kind of stamp it with important, urgent,
Yeah, I would think
listen,
so. Right, right.
be attentive.
Yes. And the spirit people, I like to consider the spirit people my clients first, because they have a need, they have an agenda, they have things that they need to say. And I'm certain that they gather together and say, well, we're only going to be able to get, a couple of minutes with Richard in this group. So why don't you go, grandparents, and say your thing? Or why don't you, Uncle Pete, go and say your thing? And by the way, she remembers our name, so we're not going to come through, Ramona, for example, because I always ask the spirit people, especially with repeat clients or people that I know something about, give me either a spirit I've never met before, or if I've met you before in a reading before, tell me something about you that I don't know already. Come through with that, so I won't be using my own memory.
It's like, oh, wait a minute, how did you know that I had a blue blankie as a little kid and I called it Gertrude?
Right, exactly.
Nobody but my mother and my father knew that. I didn't, but
Right, right. No, but you're
and that's the
absolutely
kind of thing you're talking about in that respect.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
because if let's say you and I, or I knew more about you, or you come for a reading 3 months from now, let's say, or I return to Santa Barbara and you're in the audience, even if you're saying people come through, they're going to come through in a way that I would not recognize from the last time.
Hmm.
So if I bring those grandparents through again, they're going to maybe talk about their ethnicity, or that you have their cuckoo clock or something like this. And you might say, yes, that's my grandparents that came through last time. And I'll be like, okay, good to know. So I try to forget everything as well. So, and usually because I see so many clients, I do forget the details of people.
Yeah. And which is actually probably a good thing in that respect, because
Absolutely.
you want to start fresh, as it
Right.
were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And people often, are concerned that mediums have looked them up or psychics have looked them up on Facebook. But if you're really doing your work, any advanced knowledge just gets in the way. I don't want to know anything about anybody, because then I'm second guessing the impressions that I'm getting, or I'm overthinking it. And thinking and analyzing is the greatest obstacle to communicating from spirit, to mediumship and psychic stuff. We need to get out of our thinking minds and just let it flow through.
You are a psychic and a medium. Is that how we want to put it?
Correct. Yes.
And you have a website. And that website, if I am remembering from our last interview, is actually a practical medium,
Oh, a
correct?
practical psychic.
Oh, I got myself tricked. because I thought it was the other way around. A practical psychic, which I like better. It sounds better than a practical medium. Practicalmedium.com is the website. We encourage folks to go there as we continue talking with Patricia Keresey here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and it's really a pleasure to have you back here on the program, Patricia, to talk more about this, especially after experiencing this. I know that my wife and I both attended, and of course, she received messages from her, I think it was like her brother and her father, who are both William or Bill, as it were. And it was, and I have to say, we haven't talked about it yet. I don't know if she'll ever bring it up, but one thing that I thought was rather interesting was that apparently they were pretty happy with the choice that she made with her present mate. And again, I'm not taking any credit for that. I'm just who I am. But at the same time, I sit there and I go, well, that's great that they're, I never got to meet them. They were already passed on by the time I came along. And so it's kind of like, oh, that's nice. I'm sort of kind of posthumously getting their blessing of sorts. But at the same time, it's more for her as not so much for me. But when you hit a spot in these gatherings, or even on a one-on-one with your clients, and some information comes out that is not reconciled before the end of the session, what do you do with that? I mean, it's still hanging out there. You haven't fit it into the puzzle, if you will, yet. Do you jot that down and say, you know what, we'll hold on to this until next time?
Actually, I ask people to remember it, the person I'm talking to, try to keep it in mind, because sometimes in my translation, I am not saying it in a way that is recognized by that receiver. But when they go tell their sister or mother about it, they're like, oh, yes, that was this. You didn't know, but, I did make that dress for your sister, for example. So, and of course, there is a small percentage of the time that I'm incorrect, that I've interpreted something or my own thought in the, and you may have heard me do this a couple times over the course of my delivery of messages, where the spirit will say to me, I'm Priscilla, you're putting too much into it. Stop talking, just say the thing. Don't, because I think we can't help but try to put things in context in some way. And very often, not very often, but still a little too often, I can't help but extrapolate information, and spirit always corrects me. If the person doesn't correct me, the spirit corrects me, like everything you said except for the last thing. Mm-hmm. Or I know what you mean about flowers. It doesn't have anything to do with the name. It's just because I just brought the flowers to their gravesite today, and I go, oh well, there you go. So I think that's just some of the errors in translation, and being a conduit, and translating from one language to another. It's an imperfect art.
And there are times when, and I'm sure you've experienced this to the point where you're able to know that you, Patricia, your personality has sort of gotten in the way. Not necessarily intentionally, it just happens. Right. Because your mind is still buzzing along there. So talk about that a little bit in terms of any of us, for that matter, because that's one of the things too that you hold certain classes and things of this nature, that people can actually learn how to open up to their own. And I like this from Dr. Newton. They can open up to their own cluster. Yes. The entities, the spirits or souls that they associate and have been associated with for who knows how many hundreds, thousands, millions of years in terms of reincarnation.
Well, this is the biggest challenge, I think, for people who are learning, as well as people who have been doing it for 25 years like I have. What comes through our intuition is in the same place in our mind that our imagination is, our subconscious mind, our dreams, our memories, that sort of very soft area. And everything else that we analyze, rationalize, logically deduce, that's all in the different part of the mind, which is very black and white. And we need that conscious part, that rational part of the mind, to find a context for this non-rational part of the mind. And I think most of us, when we overthink things, we get in the way. Everybody has a sixth sense. Everybody has a perfectly functioning extrasensory perception, an instinct, a gut sense, a hunch, whatever you want to call it. And more often than not, because it isn't tangible and rational, we talk ourselves out of it. I talk to so many people who say, "Oh man, I knew that. I knew I should have done that. I knew I shouldn't have done that." And the hardest thing to do, no matter how many years you've been doing it like I have, is to straddle these two parts of the mind. So when I'm translating, when I have to take something from this non-rational part and funnel it through the rational part of my mind so I can make a sentence that makes sense for somebody, it's like squishing down an enormous idea into a tiny little vocabulary tube. And it just gets colored by it. And when we are talking to ourselves or vetting our own intuitive impressions, we do the same things. But everybody can do it. Everybody has a sixth sense that is feeding them information that is, one of the ways we can tell the difference between what is intuitive information and what is thinking mind information is intuitive information is always neutral. So even if we're getting the impression of something that we wouldn't want to have happen to us, oh, my husband's cheating on me, or I think I just got ripped off, or something's wrong with the car. It comes through in a neutral way without fear. So I always like to use this example. If I'm walking across the tarmac to get on my plane and I start thinking, why am I thinking about the plane crashing? Why am I thinking about this? And I get myself into a panic, that's not a psychic impression. That is just my mind going in circles. But if I'm walking across the tarmac and I suddenly feel like I need to turn around and run, or I see or smell, psychically like flames, that's when you turn around and walk away, not when you've brought yourself into a panic. So it's always neutral.
Well, one of the aspects of this is in terms of, I would actually put it in the same category as we just talked about this in the last program about getting confirmation about something I really already know, but it sure would be nice if I could get some outside confirmation, support, and so forth. And it is. I mean, this is kind of why we're here. We're all here together to work together. So, if you've got a little piece of information, not one of those, God told me to tell you. No. That's not what that's about, is it? Not at all.
No, not at all. Not at all. And that's why I call myself a practical psychic, because if you can't use the intuitive information you're getting from yourself or someone else in a way that empowers you to make better decisions and have a happier, more peaceful life, what good is it? I mean, I'm into spirit guides and angels and those sorts of things, but for me, they're a little bit too new age, I would say, for people to make a practical use of. I could say, oh, in a past life you were this, or I see, a guide from Native American tribe around you. But if it doesn't help you, expand your business or have a better relationship with your wife or your kids, or, that's nice to know. But how can you apply it into your human existence right now to have a more peaceful, healthier life?
Priscilla Keresey is my guest here on the program. We're talking about apracticalpsychic.com, the website, and you're listening to Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and both you and, was it Melissa, am I correct?
Michelle.
Michelle, beg your pardon. Michelle, we're both there Friday night, that particular Friday night. I have to tell you, I cannot believe that it was that long ago, and yet it was not that long ago. I don't know what's going on with time and space and all of that kind of stuff, but the calendar is just flying.
Oh, yeah, I agree.
I don't know. They say that when you're a young kid, I remember as a young kid, if it was something I didn't want to do, the time wouldn't move fast enough. And then if it was something I was really having a blast at, time would fly by. Come on, it's time to come in for dinner, or whatever the case might be. And now it's like it doesn't matter whether you're into it or you're not into it. It's still it's like, what do you mean today's Friday already? It was just Monday. What do you mean August? I'm still working on May, and that kind of stuff. Have you gotten any insights from any of these spirits on the other side, if you will? And I have a hard time with that one saying the other side. It's just a side. It's just we just can't see it because it's at a different vibration. But in terms of this concept of time, and I'll throw one other piece of information in there. You may be aware of this. There was an article that was just out that says that the Earth has just sped up. Now, maybe only a millisecond or something, but it's spinning ever so slightly a little faster. And that's got to have some impact,
Yeah.
you know. I mean, it goes too fast and we're all going to be flying off of the planet. I don't care how much gravity, we have. You get something spinning fast enough and everything that's loose is gone.
Yep.
But what about that in terms of any information that you've imparted maybe to someone else who, let's say, for example, an individual, a client, or in a gathering such as that Friday evening, who's kind of, really perplexed about all of this time stuff and how fast things are going as they get older and older. And so this entity comes through to help them to, just take it easy.
Yeah.
And let me just explain to you what's going on. Have you gotten any kind of information like that?
A little bit. The spirit people often remind me and my clients that there's no time where they are. So they often encourage us to live happily, to live in the present, not to, not to let grief weigh us down for too long, thinking we're honoring them. For example, I shouldn't smile or laugh because my child is in spirit.
Yeah.
They often say, it's like carrying all this baggage through all the years and the miles, arriving at your destination and learning, I didn't have to take all this luggage with me. What do you mean? So they often remind us that time is here for us. It really is all happening at the same time. So we ought to try to live in the moment and not project ourselves too far into the future or be too stuck in the past.
And for some, it's that can be really hard because I mean, I've been working in this business for over 40 years, and this business is run by the clock. You got to stay on time. When you're running programming on the radio, or I actually worked for a short time at a television station. Well, it's the same thing, same concept, principle, and you live and die by the clock, as it were. And things have to be timed properly, and the list goes on of all of the different aspects thereof. And then there are times when I might have a day that I don't have anything scheduled per se. It's like I could have sworn I scheduled 2 or 3 interviews for today, but I've got my calendar's empty. There's nothing there, and it's like, okay, well, I could finish reading my book. I'm trying to edit and get it ready for publishing. I could go out to the beach. I mean, I'm 20 minutes walking to the beach.
How nice.
20 days if I was still living in Phoenix. If I'm lucky and I survive the desert trek, 20 days to the beach. Or do I just go somewhere quietly, close my eyes, and just listen to that still small voice, which of course we encourage everybody to do. I would take it that that there's a consistent message in that regard from the spirit world that you human beings, you really need to stop. I don't care if it's for a minute and a half or 5 minutes. You need to just stop, close and just be right there, and don't try not to think about anything. And if you do, just let the thoughts just go on through like water through a pipe, or water in a river going down to the sea. Just let it, and just kind of be right where you are and who you are, what you are. I take it that's something that we're getting.
Oh, Without a doubt. So many people who come to me for psychic insight and, of some practical use in their lives, they feel like they're stuck. They're in a rut. They don't know what to do next. They feel like they're here to do something, but they don't know what it is, or they know they want to take a different job, but they don't know what it is. The spirit people have often said, so now these are my words too, that I advise people, just like boredom is a gift. Time to do nothing is a gift, because if you're not busying yourself with being productive or some task that you're not mindful about anyway, letting yourself daydream really allows your intuition to come up, to float to the surface. And so I always advise people, if they don't know where they want to be in 5 years or next year, instead of trying to determine what that is out in the future and reverse engineer your way back to it, that works brilliantly with the rational mind if you have a strategy for money or business. But if you don't know, better to ask yourself in your daydreaming, in your boredom, what next? Not what's the end result, but what next? And then if you listen and pay attention, ideas and inspirations begin to crop up, and you're like, oh, I remember this person. And it might not even seem immediately as though this is a direct answer to what I just asked, but oh, I'm thinking about this childhood friend. Maybe I'll call him or her. And then you get the next it's like you get these leads. That's like, come this way, come this
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
And so I think, that time with nothing to do is so important. If we can just sit and ask ourselves, what next, or just daydream and let the mind, like you said, just wander like water through a pipe or water down a riverbed.
That's been early on in my career. That was one of the frustrations for me, was not being able to find an end. It's like there's got to be a finish line here somewhere. But in
Right.
radio and television, there is no finish line. There is no end. It's continuous. It's like, okay, you finish today, you come back tomorrow, you do it all over again. And the next day you do it all over again. And the next day you do it all over again. And you repeat and rinse and repeat and rinse and repeat. And I think that there's something in our minds. I don't know if it's in our DNA necessarily, but there's something in the personality mind that wants to have. I mean, I even talk to people about this in the context of whether it's creating commercials or other production pieces or presentations. There's a beginning, there's a middle, and there's an end. And that's how you want to produce it. And I remember when I did my very first radio theater, I was 21 years old, never, ever done it before. And the only way that I could wrap my head around it was, this is just a real long commercial that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And, and of course, when it was all over, said and done, oh my God, it was so fabulous. Anyway, I think that's where it's like it's in our human brain, in our personality mind, where we seem to think that we got to, and that's why we have such a problem with death.
You're probably right with that, because I just read this. I'm not sure, maybe it was a TED talk, I don't remember, but that one of the biggest causes of stress in the human mind is having things undone or having things incomplete, which is why it can feel so satisfying to cross things off a list. And we may not be aware that it's creating stress, but if you always feel like there's something I ought to be doing or something is unfinished, it prevents us from living in the present, because then we become scattered or worried about what will happen if we don't finish it, or we're stuck in the past, like, why didn't I finish that? So I think you're right about death, first of all, because people see it as an end, and it is of sorts.
Mm-hmm.
It's certainly the end of our spirits incarnate in the body and then discarnate out of the body. But it's not really a satisfying motivation to get as many toys as we can before we die, or get as many accomplishments done as we can. If we're doing those things because we enjoy them, as you were mentioning with, radio, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. If we are doing things that we like, eventually that that approach we have when we're younger, because I know exactly what you're talking about, sort of fades away, and we become more involved in the moment and the things we're doing in the moment. And that's where time really stalls for us, when we're so engaged in something that, you look up at the clock and 4 hours has gone by. As opposed to what we were talking about earlier, when you're a kid and you're doing something you don't want, you feel surely 4 hours has gone by, and it's been 3.5 minutes when you
A watched clock, just like a watched pot. And that whole scenario, it's just real interesting. Patricia Keresey is my guest. A practicalpsychic.com's the website. Hope you folks will spend some time going there. Maybe set up an appointment with her. She can do it on the phone or over Zoom if you're here in California, here in Santa Barbara, to maybe get some insights. Hear from, who knows? I mean, again, I didn't expect to hear from my grandparents, you know. And it sure brought back some really cool memories, especially in my childhood of being there in the mornings, going out to the fig tree that they had growing off to the side of the driveway, the covered carport, and picking and eating right off the tree the figs, or being with my grandmother in the backyard where she had a covered area where she had this giant concrete stove with a cast iron top on it. And she would make the tortillas and put them out there, and she'd flip them. She wouldn't use any utensils. It was just her fingers, and she'd get in there and flip them over. She didn't burn herself. Or the tamales that she would make. I mean, just the memories of going to the corral with my grandfather, and he would let us ride the donkeys. Boy, they were ornery, I'll tell you what. Or even once, I think we actually were able, maybe more than once, ride the horses that they had there in the corral. A lot of our relatives.
To go back to,
Yeah.
because you're recalling something from the past, you're literally, transcending time, going back in time, and the feelings are
Yeah.
coming back, and the heat and the temperature and the smells.
Yes, the heat.
Those things. Yeah. I mean, that's what the spirit people really want to remind us, that this is life. Life never really ends, and every memory that they have of you is alive in every moment. We don't have to, they don't have to, like we do, fish back way back in time to an early memory. It's right there for them, or that's what they tell me. And again, this is just my experience with the spirit people of how they explain things to me. Almost like every memory I have of you and my love for you exists all at the same time for me. So it's hard for us to, because we can only kind of focus on one thing at a time, but to know that their being is all about love and loving memories, and as well as some of the things that weren't so loving, having an awareness, a self-awareness of those things is important too.
It also, and in that aspect, teaches us why we are maybe the way we are. We're talking with Patricia Keresey here on AM 1290, and this is Tell Me Your Story. A practicalpsychic.com's the website. Patricia Keresey is my guest, and I find these conversations real interesting. You said something earlier too about, how we're trying to check off certain things on the list. And yeah, I used to do that. And then there's a part of me now that's going, yeah, I would like to finish this, check it off of my to-do list.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that if I do, it's going to be replaced with something else. Because that's just what happens. It's not superstitious or, jinxing it, or, if I don't talk about it, I won't get any more. And eventually I'll have my plate clean, and I'll have no more spinning plates. And, I can just relax and not have to forget it. This is life, and you got life to live. And there are so many things. I went to the Camarillo Air Show here in Camarillo, California, up the coast. Probably take you 45 minutes to an hour to drive there from Santa Barbara. 18 minutes by little experimental plane that my friend owns. Put it on autopilot there. 19 minutes. Came back. I got to fly the plane. I'm learning how to fly. I don't think it took more than 15 minutes. And it was fantastic. And you're going 200 miles an hour up there, okay? At about 3,000 feet. Clear skies. Oh, it was beautiful. It really was. But that aspect of traveling, and you kind of alluded to it in the context of traveling back into the past. And I was in Ireland in at Christmas time 2002 through New Year's. And then the following year, 2004, went back again. My wife and I both, we went on our honeymoon, and then we went again the next year on her birthday. And we were there for 2 weeks each time. And when we got there the second time, I tell you, it was not like, okay, starting the clock, it's day one of 2 weeks. It's day one of week 3. It was like we picked up right where we left off.
That's great.
There was like there was a connection
Yeah,
between
yeah.
those two events. It was so cool.
I love that. That is really cool. And I think it takes a certain person to pick up that thread. I'm not sure that everybody does that naturally. I think we all have the ability to do it naturally, but I do feel, especially an American person, where we are very clock bound, or we
Oh,
are
yeah. Mm-hmm.
exactly 2 weeks out of the 52. We want to get as much experience as we can. So it's get in the car, go to this winery, go to that fishing village, go here, go there, and so it's hard to just absorb it all. But I'm glad that you had that experience, because I think that's kind of rare.
I probably is, and I have to tell you that I remember when we flew in the first time. We had a reservation for, I think it was like maybe 2 nights, and I'd been out of the country before then, but it was on a 7-day cruise down the coast of Mexico,
Mm.
to the Mexican Riviera. That was the cruise, right? So it's like, yeah, you're out of the country, but you're not really out of the country. So there I am in Ireland. I couldn't believe all of a sudden a wave of homesickness hit me, and I was like, oh, we got to go home. And now we weren't going anywhere. We were staying there. We had just started 2 weeks. But it was one of those things where I'm not even sure where that came from, because I wasn't necessarily thinking about home. I was really trying to immerse myself in the moment and where we were. And yet just this wave came over me. Oh, and I'm not kidding you, I was in tears. My wife was actually a little concerned that maybe we were going to turn around and go back. But as soon as because we didn't really have a plan.
Yeah.
And as soon as we had a plan to go south into County Waterford to a bed and breakfast that we stayed at for a week, I was fine. Yeah, okay, we're here. This is fantastic. Oh, wow, this is a great and the green and so on and so forth. And I have a feeling that maybe that's also what they're trying to tell us from the other side too, is that there's nothing to be afraid of while you're here. I do have to say, I saw this interesting thing on LinkedIn. I thought this was really fascinating, because I also have seen postings of people wearing these T-shirts. This one young gal was wearing a T-shirt, basically saying, "I'm independent. I'm this. I'm that. I don't mask. I don't vaccinate. I don't blah 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 blah." Then I saw another little cartoon, or actually it was cartoonish in the way it was written, that said, "You are trusting God to protect you from the virus? Then explain to me why you need a gun."
That's
And
great.
it's like, immediately I got the irony, but I
Yeah.
also got the point.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not an anti-gun person, don't get me wrong. I will defend a gun owner's right to own his guns as long as he will defend me in the time of need, you know.
Sure.
I'll supply you with the bullets, the ammunition. But I just find it real interesting that we take all of these different perspectives, and yet I sit here. I don't know about you. I may have asked this of you in the last program. If today's my last day, I'm good. I'm good to go. I'm not afraid of going. My sister, who has already gone on, she's gonna be there waiting for me.
Mm.
Great, or whoever it is that I have been associating with for lifetimes in my cluster is going
Right.
to be waiting there to bring me into the fold, so to speak, into the cluster. Hey, welcome. It's good to have you back, and so on and so forth.
And
And
I think that we're all nobody gets out of this alive. So we
Well, that's
ought
what my dad's always told me.
to try to bring it back into the mainstream conversation,
Yeah.
to allow people to die at home. If people are feeling like, they have a terminal illness and they want to take care of their own passing in their own way with dignity, instead of trying, through every possible means to keep someone alive, to buy 3 months. I mean, I'm not in that position. I might feel entirely differently when I am, but I
Yeah.
like to
Yeah.
think, if there wasn't so much fear
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
dying, if we spoke to our ancestors, as many of more original and aboriginal persons did, people did,
Hmm.
um, we would realize they're very much still part of life and families. They're not in a physical body, but they are still
Right.
themselves. They're still intelligent. We can still have interactions and relationships with them. We can feel their love and forgiveness. We can give them ours. And, we might as well get used to it because nobody's going to beat it.
Yeah.
And I think we do ourselves a disservice, those cultures that want to just tidy it up or make it sterile or have it happen over there. It's not too healthy, I think.
I have to give my mother and father a lot of credit because when my grandmother, one of the two that was speaking to me Friday, passed away in our home on, well, we'll call it today. It's Black Friday. It's not Black. It wasn't Black Friday then, but the Friday after Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving evening, we watched her favorite movie, The Sound of Music. She took us to see it in a drive-in theater in Florence that
Wow.
summer. So she watched her favorite movie, went to bed. My eldest sister, who since passed, said that, oh yeah, I remember she got up, she went to the bathroom, she came back, she laid down, never got up again.
Hmm.
But they didn't keep us away. Oh no, no, keep the kids out. No, no,
Okay.
we can't. They didn't do that. And matter of fact, I remember my grandfather dying of a heart attack, and I remember getting that my parents got the phone call, and then they were sharing this with us. I was a teenager delivering newspapers, and there I was at home and everything, and and we went to the funeral. They had a parade for the man. I think I remember mentioning that he was police chief, he was fire chief, and so forth and so on. And so they had his boots backwards in the stirrups of his horse in the
Oh,
parade, along,
wow.
of course, with his coffin being on a wagon being drawn by, I think, two horses or maybe a single horse.
Hmm.
I mean, it was pretty spectacular. And then when my grandmother passed away a few years later, when we had the funeral, I was almost ushered out of the church because
Really?
I was being too upsetting. I was crying and carrying on and everything else, and it's like, well, but isn't that what this is for? I thought, okay, all right, I'll calm down. And then I remember when my dear Makushla, my beautiful white shepherd chow mix, when we had to let her go, I didn't shed a tear until I was in therapy.
Hmm.
And my friend here in Santa Barbara, he put me under, and it was conscious. It was a conscious hypnotherapy session. So I'm
Okay.
fully aware.
Yeah.
And my tears flowed because I felt so guilty for keeping her here so long.
Hmm.
I mean, we cared for her and helped her in every way, shape, or form we could for 14 months after she lost the use of her hind legs. 14 months. Oh, man. And I wanted to let her go quite literally several months after she lost the use of her legs. I thought, this is not fair to her. This isn't right, and so forth. But my wife and I at the time were not on the same page. She's, no, no, she still has a lot more love and she'll let us know and so on and so forth, which, again, I knew all of this. But I just thought, no, So I wonder about that. Whereas with my sister, the only tears that I've shed were at the memorial. And
Mhm.
I laughed too. I laughed too, but I cried. What about the connection that we make? I mean, do you cry over the people who die in a foreign country you've never heard of and that you don't even know who they are? Because you have no connection to them directly. Whereas if it were a brother, a sister, a mother, a father, a husband, a wife, a child, a close friend, associate, and so forth, you're probably going to feel something. You're probably going to feel some deep emotion, maybe some tears. And it got me to thinking, well, maybe we shouldn't attach so tightly to other human beings so that we didn't feel
Mm.
that grief that way. What your thoughts on that?
Or maybe we should attach ourselves more to people so we can love them enough that not only we feel their loss when they pass away, but we feel duty bound to make sure their lives are comfortable and that they're well fed and healthy.
Yeah.
I have lost my dad. He's been gone about 20 years. My nephew passed away at 27, tragically, very rare cancer, and my cousin at 36. So there's been loss in my family. And even though I'm a medium and I have had, the privilege of connecting people of all ages, who passed away at all ages, with their people still in the physical world, the grief that I feel is so tangible. And a lot of it is grief for me and my loss, but it's also, I put myself in my sister's shoes who lost her son, my nephew, and I know a big part of my sorrow is for her. And it's an interesting, not something I often talk about to people, because people can be very judgmental about how you're grieving, how long you're grieving, what it looks like, is it appropriate according to them. And we all tackle that differently. But I, even though there's a part of me that knows I'll see my nephew again and my dad and my cousin, um, the world is different because they're not here anymore. My world is different because they're not here anymore. My world is different because my sister, who is my best friend, has been, irrevocably changed by that. And that's sad, when the dynamic changes or life changes. And that's so maybe I'm not so much grieving the loss, but grieving the change and the sorrow that somebody else is experiencing.
We're talking with Patricia. It is Patricia, isn't it?
It's Priscilla,
Priscilla. Who's Patricia?
my mother,
It's your twin. What do you think of that?
my
I
mother.
just gave you a twin. We're talking with Priscilla. Priscilla Keresey. She has a website. It is apracticalpsychic.com. And we hope that you'll go there. We will, as of course, with our other interview, we will be linked to that website as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and we're talking with Priscilla Keresey, and we're talking about the work that she does in a manner of speaking, I suppose you could say, sort of, I don't know if it's necessarily reuniting ones with their loved ones as much as opening a door and allowing the loved ones to come through and share their thoughts. This is not a question and answer session. It's not like 60 Minutes where you're going to get to grill your relative about why they did what they did. This is about them. It's sort of one-sided information that they feel is important for you to have.
Yes. And that's a good point. It isn't so much a dialogue. And again, I prefer that because when somebody asks me a direct question, it immediately engages my conscious thinking mind. And I don't want that part of my mind anywhere involved in this process. So if somebody asks me a question, It's either a test, like what was my favorite number, one of these sorts of things, or I gave him one thing to show me, what is it, so they're testing me, or testing whether it's really their spirit person. So I don't like those sorts of things anyway. But also, if somebody has a question like, a legitimate question like, did you hear me say goodbye? Because you were unconscious when I was holding your hand. And so with questions like that, I don't answer immediately. I toss it to the spirit person, or I know that they hear it, and I carry on with whatever I'm doing. And then the spirit will slip in somewhere in that their answer to that question. Describing it in a way that doesn't feel to me like I'm answering the question. So the spirit might come through in that example and say, I'm aware that the family was around me singing songs, and my favorite Frank Sinatra song, for example. And this answers the person's question, did you know that we were there around you? Yes, because I just told you everything that was happening while I was unconscious. So that is a way that the spirit people can answer the questions of their loved ones without using my thinking mind, which only gets in the way.
And that's interesting. That's interesting because we do tend to do this. We get in our own way many, many times.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like getting out of your own way, not only in terms of living your own life's purpose, but in terms of getting information that is going to be really beneficial, that's going to be helpful for you and to you, for the people around, as far as living your life. I've gotten to I don't know about you, Priscilla, but I've gotten to the point in my life where I really do feel like my life is so guided, so directed. And I'm not saying that I've turned on autopilot and I'm not really kind of watching what I'm doing anymore, like when we flew from Santa Barbara to Camarillo on autopilot. I'm very much aware, and it's like today when I was driving to work, and I was coming up to an intersection, and one of those, which way should I go? And it wasn't even that, it was, turn right. No big deal. Turn right. And I turned, so I turned right. Didn't have a problem with that. Yet I know that there are a lot of people who feel as though, no, I've got to be in control all the time. Do you find that with a lot of folks, that your clients, that they're learning how to, if you will, give up control because the way they're doing it isn't working too well?
Yeah. I'm not legally or ethically allowed to advise people as
Sure.
either a psychic or a medium.
Mm-hmm.
But, there are people who really do get in their own way, or they overthink things, as we were talking about earlier. And because the sixth sense is so natural, many people respond to it, obey it, sort of respond to it without really realizing they're doing that. So when I teach classes and I teach people how to recognize their sixth sense, to be conscious of it, when they can apply it, how they can, kind of marry it to their good sense about things. So when somebody's learning to pay attention to the sixth sense, it kind of comes out of a very natural experience, one that's a little unnatural, like here's what I'm thinking, here's what I'm feeling, and then it begins to fold back into being sort of subsumed with our natural way of doing things. And I call that discernment. We've got our logical mind, but we also have giving equal, play to our intuition. And so then we've arrived at a kind of discernment that gives us confidence in the decisions that we're making, or feeling like I don't need to explain to every Tom, Dick, and Harry why I went right instead of went left. I'm just following what feels right. And so ideally, we don't separate them. Here's my thinking, here's my intuition, but we have that level of discernment, so we don't second guess ourselves. We're confident in the choices that we make.
And that, to me, seems real important. The level of confidence. Talk to us a little bit about that in terms of developing that confidence. And I know that there's a part of this also that has to do with one. I mean, confidence is also part of self-esteem, self-worth. How we think about ourselves. And and maybe you can elaborate a little bit on this with your experience. And again, recognizing and acknowledging the things you can and can't do in your field, but trying to help people to sort of rebuild because they've been beaten down by life in childhood or teenage years or wherever, to rebuild that confidence and that self-esteem so that they aren't constantly relying on outside sources. And again, that's not to say, because if we were meant to live solitary lives, I know there are enough planets in the universe that we could all occupy one. But the reality is we're here. So obviously there's a reason why we're all together. There's a connection that we're supposed to have. But at the same time, there needs to be that inner strength, if you will. I know that you don't necessarily do counseling, but I'm certain that some of this kind of comes up over time with some of the clients as well, maybe even from, or maybe specifically from the other side, the other spirit, the spirit world.
It's interesting that you bring that up, self-esteem, because I think it is inseparable from the spirit. I actually wrote 2 books on self-esteem. You can find those on my website too. One is called The Self-Esteem Solution, and the second one is called Rise and Shine, and it has 52 chapters dealing with self-esteem issues. So there's a meditation for each day, Monday through Friday, and you can read it in any order. But so many of the things that we do from low self-esteem, looking at the world like Pollyanna, or through, pessimism, or being passive aggressive, or unilateral contracts. All of these things arise from the sense that something about us is incomplete or missing or flawed or wrong. And so the spirit people say over and over again, there's nothing wrong with you. That's not to say we don't behave wrongly or make errors in decisions that we make, but who we are is perfect. Our spirit is fully formed, whether we draw one breath here in the physical world or a million, we are whole. And that's why when you and I were talking earlier about some of that boredom, some of that time when there's nothing to do, if we start to listen, or in our boredom pay attention, or ask ourselves, well, what's next? We start to understand that still small voice you referenced. We start to understand what we desire. And inherent in every desire, incipient in every desire, is the timeless awareness of the accomplishment of that desire. So when we know what our desires are, we're called forward to fulfill our purpose. And our purpose is to be ourselves and nothing more, not to be anybody else. People say, I don't know what I'm not passionate about anything. Well, that's okay. If you're following through with what you feel is right for you, you're living a purposeful life. That isn't always a life of, of service above self. It isn't always being a parent or giving alms to the poor. Sometimes it's dancing or writing haiku or sitting in the forest. But who we are and how we express ourselves is all part of the diverse tapestry of God or the Great Spirit, and how we are all woven together. So I think with many, many of my clients, especially those who really need to hear it, we have spirit people come in who might have impacted someone's self-esteem. There was a mother in spirit at our gathering on Friday night who was very discouraging to her daughter who was in the audience, and and really had undermined her self-esteem and gave her a kind of a bit of a rough start in life. And, for spirit people to recognize this and to say to their loved ones here through a medium, or even, in one's own meditation, stop judging yourself so harshly. You're fine. There's nothing wrong with you. Love yourself. Because in the end, you're going to understand that you are wholly and completely lovable, and do what you love. I think you're muted, Richard.
I, I, I can tell you that that can be more difficult than you can imagine in certain instances, because we're getting those outside messages all the time that are telling us that we aren't good enough, that you need to be fixed.
Mhm.
You need to go see a doctor. You need to go see a therapist. You need to go see this person, that person, the other person, and so on and so on and so on. And, and I myself, I sit there and I go, back in 93, 94, I was fixed, okay? I was neutered, all right? So I'm fixed. I don't need to be fixed again. And I think that's one of the aspects. Let's talk a little bit about this more from the context of being perfect. Now, I'll define that for you from my perspective and have you elucidate. In the Bible, it says, in the New Testament, it says, "Be ye perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect." And I wondered about that, and I finally came to the conclusion, based upon some Old Testament passages, primarily I think it was from Psalms, where it talks about, "I am that I am," and God is neither good nor bad, right or wrong, black or white, etc., etc. And the only thing that left was, it just is. God just is. And it wasn't about any of that other stuff other than just being in the moment. So let's talk about the concept of perfection in all of this, because there are those who are perfectionists who believe that it's got to be done right, and it's got to be done the right way, and it can't be done any other way. You know, this is the only way that it should be done, and we'll never do it any other way because this is the only, and so forth. And yet, look at the innovations we have in our world today. And I was talking with my friend who owns the plane when we were out at the air show. I said, it's amazing the diverse. There aren't two planes alike on the airfield. It's like amazing. And yet, there are those who say that there's only one way, there's only one path to the divine. And it's like, that doesn't make any sense. So, share with us a little your perspective on perfection.
Well, I think it's important. We have knowledge that we gather through our world experience and our studies and what we pursue with our intellect, and then we have knowing, which is our sense of ourselves. And so there are, of course, things that we know and do imperfectly. So those behaviors, those decisions, those relationships, those, because of the dual nature of the world we live in, us and them, black and white, this side and that side, we are going to be making judgments, and we are going to measure ourselves and others against certain standards. But as we know ourselves, it's important to know ourselves to be whole and perfect. And I think that is, with someone who's very arrogant or who has a low self-esteem and is very, well, that's where arrogance comes from, as well as bullying, as well as, meekness, feeling that either we are more perfect or less perfect, when in fact we just are. Just that, God is, we are, and there's no division, because as you mentioned, God just is, the creator just is, not black or white, male or female, but all, omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient, a unity. We are that same way inside. And that's why the spirit people always remind us not to judge ourselves. We can judge our actions and hopefully learn from them, but we shouldn't let them impact our sense of ourselves. Like, I can look at something and go, "Ooh, I made a mistake. I shouldn't have done that." But a person with a healthy self-esteem is not going to go, "Oh, you idiot. You're such a jerk. How could you?" They're not going to let its hooks get into their sense of themselves. And knowing that our spirits are perfect isn't going to make us braggarts or arrogant or snobs. It's going to make us understand that we may act imperfectly, but if we're following the knowing that we're perfect, We're not going to force other people to do what we want to do. We're not going to nag other people to get things done because we're projecting our own insecurities onto them. Neither are we going to allow ourselves to subsume what our desires are so other people don't have to deal with their insecurities. And so I think that that sense of spiritual perfection is critical to one's self-esteem and one's confident ability to follow what their own self-expression says, whether that's I'm trans, I'm gay, I'm an artist, I'm a musician, I'm a loner, I'm a super social person, whatever our perfect sense of ourselves informs us how to express that.
Yeah. I find it fascinating too, with people who are opposed to the differences, okay, which is kind of funny in a way, almost ironic. But they're opposed to the differences. And my first thought is, number one is, do you honestly believe that this individual who is living this particular lifestyle, I don't care what it is going to break into your home and try to convert your family to that lifestyle? Number one. And number two, what? Do you think that the lifestyle they are living is contagious? Like COVID? Come on. It's to me, it's like there's. Forgive me for putting it this way. I don't mean to insult anybody, but it seems like there's so much ignorance right there. You know.
And I think a lot of fear, because when you see people expressing themselves confidently, and it doesn't fit in your worldview, I feel really the reason people respond with such anger and fear and ignorance, or like doubling down on their beliefs, is because they haven't been able to touch with what they feel they themselves are. They've been married to somebody else's narrative for so long that the idea of surrendering it for, hey, what could be in there, is just too unsettling. So they just kind of double down on their what they've chosen to follow because it feels safer than peering inside and going, maybe there's nothing there, or maybe what's there will be surprising, and I'll disappoint my parents, or my wife will hate me. So we spend way too much time viewing ourselves through the lens of how others view us, when really nobody really cares. We're also concerned about ourselves.
I love that. Matter of fact, I take the same perspective in terms of, for example, people knowing about me. Now, as you obviously know, you in my interviews, I share a lot about my personal life, myself. I don't give out my social security number or my PIN code, mind you, but but I jokingly say that, if somebody's been following for the last 43 some odd years and listening to my interviews, they could write my unauthorized autobiography or my unauthorized biography, because I've shared so much about myself. But I've come to the conclusion, and this is sort of based upon my time at the religious radio station back in Phoenix for 15 years. God, who is omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent, knows everything about me. This is the dogma that we're taught, okay? Knows everything. Then what difference does it make if all 8 billion other people know? Besides, most of them don't care. They're too busy living their lives. And those who do care and want to use and misuse and so forth, hey, I can start over. We all did when we came into this world. And I think we get so overly protective, and people are so worried about their privacy. It's like, do you know how much privacy you've given away? When you, for example, when you download an app, for example, read the fine print. Who reads the fine print? And there's even a provision. I remember they actually scrutinized it on this one documentary where it said that, we can do this and we can do that and we can. Really? You guys can. You mean to tell me by clicking yes on the terms and conditions?
Right.
I just gave you, my firstborn,
Right.
and you get to have any organs that are in my body when I die, and the list goes on. It's like, do you people realize that you've thrown away your right to privacy And I knew back in 94 when I got on the internet for the first time that the moment I got on the internet for the first time, my privacy was gone. But I didn't care because God knows everything about me, the divine. What difference does it make? And
And I think,
besides,
to your
what's,
point
go
on
ahead, go ahead, go
like,
ahead.
that people with a different lifestyle might come into your home and your family. I
Yeah,
think a lot of people are afraid, like, you'll get into my mind and change my mind. People have forgotten that they have total control over what they choose to think about or react to or feel about, and they may be influenced by media, advertising, these sorts of things, but really, ultimately, that's the only control we have. The only people we're going to lay down and sleep with at night are ourselves. And if you don't have a peace of mind and you don't find a way to really love yourself and celebrate yourself, you're not going to get a whole lot of sleep. So, some of these things like privacy and I mean, I agree with the minute you get a driver's license, you're in the privacy goodbye. But at the same time, I know myself and I'm known by God. And as much of that inner me, my spirit that I want to share,
yeah,
that's up to me to share.
yeah.
My habits, my behaviors, my buying habits, you can have those things. I don't care. I still retain the right to say no to that ad you flash up on my Facebook feed, and I'm not gonna be mindlessly zombie like clicking on purchasing things. But that kind of self-awareness and recognizing that we have control. In fact, the only control we really have is to choose how we're going to feel about things. And
Oh,
that's really empowering.
you just said something we got to touch upon, but we'll do that as we continue. We're talking with Priscilla Keresey. We're talking about the work that she does as a psychic medium, and does it matter which order? Medium, psychic medium? I know it does because you've got it on your business cards, I'm sure.
Pulls off a little bit easier psychic medium. That's why.
And we'll continue here talking about the work that she's doing that you can find out about at her website, a practicalpsychic.com. This is Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and we're talking about with Patricia. Priscilla. I don't know who Patricia is. I will find out. But Priscilla Keresey is my guest. Practicalpsychic.com is the website. But you touched upon something that, my gosh, I'm going around in circles with this in my life right now, and that is this whole issue of our emotions. And the other day I allowed myself in control here to get mad about something. But I really wasn't mad because it wasn't the first time that this had come up. And you said it so well that we do have control over how we, and I guess the right term is how we react or act, I suppose, but react to the various, to put it clinically, stimuli that are on the outside of us. And then we choose the emotions that we want or feel we need at that given moment. I'm not sure why. Honestly, I'm not sure why we choose what we choose, but we do choose. And I find that interesting.
But it's a lot of it's habit. And many of us are raised in families where, or in cultures where we hear, "You made me mad," or "You made me sad," or "You made me happy." And we take on the responsibility for other people's feelings when we're only responsible for our own. I can't make somebody mad because they always retain the choice to respond with anger or not to the things that I do.
Mm-hmm. Now, you put it so well that I choose. And I find it, I don't know about you, but I find it so, I don't know how you do this, if you do this. I can't, I know how much damage I will do to myself if I hold on to the emotions of resentment and revenge and bitterness and all of those particular emotions that, quite honestly, you see people as they get older and older, they've held on to those. And a lot of them, they're hunched over and they're walking down the street, and they can't even look up at the sky because, it's amazing. And I will also add that one of the greatest balancers is that young man or woman that's right there with you, that beautiful shepherd. Yes, yes,
Yeah.
that
My
will
boy will come
help
home.
us to balance ourselves. Talk to us about that.
Well, I agree, because dogs, as far as I know, and cats, I've got one right down here too. They just love the energy of these kinds of conversations. So they often come and just chill out with us here.
I love it.
But
I
they don't
love it.
hang on to, anger. And I think it's important to remember that as human beings, we feel before we think. So as we're little children, we respond to feelings first, because that's how we deal with, if I'm hungry, I cry. If I'm scared, I'll screech. If I'm lonely, I'll put my arms out for my mother. And we don't develop a rational ability to think and respond rationally until we're 10, 11, 12, something like this. So it's important to remember as adults, we're always going to feel first. So I may have anger. That may not be a choice for me if somebody cuts me off in traffic, for example, and I feel this anger wash up in me. But then as a thinking adult, I talk myself out of it, or I say, have a nice day, or by all means, go ahead of me. But I mean, some days that's easier than others. But, holding on to resentments and some of those negative emotions, first of all, we have these neurolinguistic pathways that are set up in our brain. So it's not easy to just say, forgive this person or stop being angry. We have to work on those things from a rational point of view with ourselves as well. And to know that we may always get angry first. I had a parent who was an overreactor and could be very domineering and bullying and terrifying. And I can hear a certain tone of voice in an authority figure, and my stomach will just drop. Now I'm 60 years old, but I still feel first, and then I have to think my way out of it and feel first and think after that, and choose my reaction to that, because that's where the power is. We don't have to be triggered. We may be triggered, but we don't have to stay in the emotion that was triggered.
Yeah.
Choose to step away from it.
And what's really, I say funny, haha, funny, strange, is how, oh God, I love that dog.
He's a good boy. Mwah.
I want that dog. But I can't have that dog because that dog is your dog. Actually, you're his.
I'm his. Indeed.
You're his. What I find so fascinating is how there are people who want me to be resentful, want me to be bitter, want me to be the way that they are.
Yeah.
And and it's like, oh, okay. I mean, that's kind of my attitude. Is, oh, okay, I'll do that, sure, but I'm not going to do
misery
that.
loves company, right? Nobody.
Yeah, and it's like I don't want to do that. My life, I'm having too much fun doing what I'm doing, and it's just astounding the number of people that are. It's like and again, I'm going to say this, and I don't want to get political here. But the 2016 presidential campaign I have called the victimhood campaign. It's everybody else's fault. We should be upset with everybody else around the world for our situation. And I'm going, you have got to be nuts. I thought we finished with victimhood in the 80s. I went through all kinds of programs and stuff, and I got myself out of the victimhood thing. I'm responsible for me, and now you're telling me I'm not, and it's somebody else's fault.
That's right.
Everybody
who did like Est in the 70s and Landmark in the 80s, right?
Yeah, well, I did an outgrowth of Est. It was LifeSpring, in the early 80s. And then I actually did all three levels, and for what that's worth. And then in the 90s, I did what's called Omega Vector, and I think they renamed it to Delta Vector. And it was based upon the 0 point of, I believe it was Teilhard, and many other teachings. And the bottom line was, and I loved this. This is what happened in the very first session I went to of Delta Vector. We're sitting there on a Wednesday night, a Wednesday evening. It's like 3 or 4 or 5 hours, whatever. And the facilitator comes and says, I can hear that some of you, you're not real happy to be here, and you really don't want to be here, and so on. And they went on and on and on. Well, let me just tell you, folks, who are sitting here in this circle, listening to me speak right now, that the reality is, the truth is, that if you did not want to be here, you wouldn't be. Ergo, you must want to be here because here is where you are. It's not my fault that you're here.
Yeah.
A matter of fact, I'm not responsible. You are. And I thought, wow. And it isn't just about, wherever you are is where you are, that old cute little saying. It's wherever you are is where you wanted to be. Because if you wanted to be somewhere else, you would be, but you aren't. You are there. And
spot on, though, because a lot of people don't feel empowered. They do feel like victims. They do feel like, I can't, or I didn't have a choice, or
I didn't have a choice. We talk about choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. Oh, he is just having a grand time, isn't he?
Yes, he's
Now, folks, I know those of you not watching Zoom, you can't see this, but and what's his name?
His name's Billabong, and I call him Billy.
Billabong?
Yeah, Billabong.
And what is that? What is that name?
Well, it's I'll tell you, there's a little story behind it. I had a shepherd before him, whose name was Memphis, and I used to call him Bill just because I'd call him Silly Bill. You know how you develop all these different nicknames for your dog.
Yeah.
So when my dog Memphis passed away, and I used to sing him a song about billabongs. It's an Australian, kind of area where a dry riverbed, really, and that's what the word means. And so when my shepherd died a year ago, April, very, very suddenly, my heart was so empty, my house was so quiet, and I knew I wanted to get another one and get a puppy, but I wasn't sure if the timing was right. And so I was watching Netflix, and one of the things I like to watch are sports documentaries, go figure. So I was watching this one about a girl who was a power lifter in Egypt. And it wasn't in English, so it had subtitles, but I was thinking, I had closed my eyes and I was just listening to the Egyptian language in the background, and thinking about my dog who passed. And I was like, Memphis, just give me a sign if it's right for me to get a puppy. And then I opened my eyes, and this girl who was the subject of the documentary, she was 13 years old. She had on a t-shirt that said Billabong, which is what it was one of the things I used to call. And I was like, all right, I got it. I'm getting a puppy, and his name is Billabong. So I call him Billy. It's my silly Billy.
Well, we have a black king shepherd. He's 100 pounds. His name is Angus.
Oh, wow.
He is one of the most independent animals I have ever had the good fortune to know and have in my life and be in his. And he is so gentle. I remember as a paper boy being chased by big black dogs his size and pedaling as fast as my legs would go to get away. With him, you could take a treat and put it in his mouth. No teeth, just lips. Now, he has teeth, don't get me wrong, but there are no teeth in the taking of the treat. And I just saw the cat go by. Oh, there you are. What a zoo. Oh, I love it. And I love that. I take it that's a picture of Billabong behind you on the wall?
That's my other shepherd.
Oh,
wall over there. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Well, This has been a fantastic hour plus, and I'm glad that we were able to reconnect. We are talking with Priscilla Keresey, a practical psychic, apracticalpsychic.com, and this is Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and we are wrapping things up here once again with our guest, Priscilla Keresey, and we're talking, of course, we've been talking, well, actually about a lot of different things that the spirit world through you is sharing, not just to your clients, but to the rest of the world. What is the prospect of any kind of a book coming out of some of the messages that you've received that are of sufficient generic nature that you're able to maybe put that into context and maybe elaborate for the rest of us to read?
Sure. Well, I've written two about my experiences as a medium. The first one is called It Will All Make Sense When You're Dead. The second one is called Nobody Gets Out of This Alive. And I'm putting together a third book on exactly that. Some of those nuggets of wisdom that spirit people have said to their loved ones, my clients, that just are, they may be specific to the person, but they're universal and really, really sometimes the kind that I would hear come out of my mouth and go, wow, listen to that, knowing it, of course, wasn't from me. So I have a bunch of those that I'm putting together now with a little meditation after each one. So you can look for that probably in the next 6 months or so.
Oh, that's cool. Well, I'll tell you what, first of 2023, let's get together once again and we'll talk about some of those messages because that could really help a lot of us, myself included. I'm perfect, as we described earlier, okay, just by being me. But at the same time, I'm still growing and learning and trying to be a better human, to myself as well as to others. I have a feeling too. That's a big message too. When we're going through crises, it's how important it is that we take care of self. Just like on the airplane, put the mask on yourself first before you put your mask on your child. The child is not going to suffocate. There's plenty of time.
And people think that's so selfish, but really, nobody's going to care as much about us as we do because we're inside our own experience. And we have to make ourselves a priority. And unfortunately, it's been celebrating ourselves is often reviled and derided, like, oh, you're just bragging. But we should celebrate ourselves when we do great things, or we've had a successful day, or we made a little bit more money. Those feeling good feels good because we're supposed to feel good. So why not do more of those things and celebrate them when we are blessed with them?
Isn't that interesting, though, how if you choose to feel those things, those are fleeting. They're here and then they're gone, which is okay. That's fine.
Right.
I mean, who stays in that state for an extended period of time? But when you get into the fear and the resentment and the bitterness and all those other things that we talked about before, people stay stuck in those for years.
It's sad.
It's bizarre. Not just sad, it's bizarre. It's like, really? That's all you can feel? Come on, this life is so diverse. It's so wonderful. And we want to thrive. We want to thrive. And I think that through the work you're doing, I think that the spirit world through you is going to help us to do just that. I envy you, his appearance there and his love and attention to you. Oh my God. I wish I had Angus here right now.
I'd love to see him.
He used to jump up on the bed with us and sleep with us.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man. And he hasn't in a long time, but I have a feeling it's primarily because he's gotten older. He'll be 10 this year. And so he's probably just doesn't have the strength, but he's still puppy-like. It's amazing. It really is. We're going to wrap things up here, and I'm going to ask you, even though it's just been a short time, since I asked you these three questions before. I'm going to ask them again because sometimes the answers change, and if they don't, that's fine too. But before I do that, I'm going to tell y'all about where you can find us. We are here Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m. in our special edition of Tell Me Your Story. Wednesdays at 9 a.m. We stream live at those times at richarddugan.com. Podcasts are on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and many other locations. And we're on YouTube where you can watch these interviews and you can watch Billy come into the program. I have to tell you that more of our guests have had cats or dogs come in. They're not barking, they're not carrying on, they're just coming in to make their presence known. And as you said, they like these conversations. Yeah. That's fantastic. So, folks, check out YouTube. Become a subscriber. I am up to a whopping 84 subscribers in 2 years. You know what? I don't care if it's only 84. I'm just glad there are 84 people that are getting notified every time a new program is posted. So that's one of the main reasons for you to subscribe, not because Richard wants 800,000 subscribers. No, that's irrelevant because I know there are more than that listening to the interviews who aren't subscribing, whether it be on the audio, the podcast, or the videocast. So if you can, do so. Also ask you to participate in the Decade of Perfect Vision, the 2020s, where we ask you to spend that little time going within that perfection that you are and listening to that still small voice. Man, what an opportunity. Learn about who you really are. All of who you really are. The diverse colors and shades and hues and all that makes you the marvelous person, the perfect person that you are. We also ask that if you can help us out financially, we would greatly appreciate that. We have a PayPal account. It's there for your security as well as ours. And we thank those who have helped and those who will. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And with that, we go to our final three questions. Who is Priscilla Keresey?
I am a perfect expression of my creator, trying to get that out in the most perfect way that I can.
What is it that you hope to or want to achieve through the work that you are doing now?
Oh, to encourage people to find that perfection in themselves and know that there's nothing wrong with them.
And finally, what is your life's purpose?
To express myself as purely and fully as I can without rationalizing, apologizing for, defending, but just to be who I am.
Well, Priscilla, again, I thank you so much for this time as well as the opportunity back on Friday, the 18th of August, to see you, quote unquote, at work. And I look forward to having you back again at the turn of the year to talk about your third book.
Thank you. I'd love that. It's always a pleasure, Richard. It was so nice to meet you and your wife in person, too.
And you and Michelle as well.
Excellent. Good. We'll see you soon then.
Absolutely. I'm Richard Dugan. I thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World, as we give you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. And until our next broadcast, podcast, videocast, love to Lal and Jeanette, I really am listening.